The morning sun filtered through the windows of Manny Pacquiao's Manila penthouse as he reviewed training schedules for his upcoming exhibition match. The boxing legend, now in his 40s, had learned to balance his athletic commitments with business ventures and political responsibilities. His phone buzzed with the usual stream of messages from promoters, trainers, and media outlets, but one call would change the trajectory of his entire week. The voice on the other end belonged to Thomas Reyes, a childhood acquaintance from General Santos City whom Manny hadn't spoken to in years. Thomas's voice carried a weight that immediately commanded attention, cutting through the morning routine with devastating news. Bayani Dela Cruz, Manny's closest friend from their impoverished youth, had passed away suddenly from a heart attack at the age of 43. The phone nearly slipped from Manny's hands as memories flooded back like a tidal wave. Bayani had been more than a friend. He had been a brother forged in the crucible of poverty, hunger, and shared dreams. They had grown up on the same dusty streets, selling cigarettes and shining shoes to survive, supporting each other through the darkest moments of their childhood, when hope seemed like a luxury they couldn't afford. Manny stared out at the Manila skyline, his mind transported back to General Santos City, where two barefoot boys once promised each other they would escape their circumstances together. While Manny had pursued boxing and achieved international fame, Bayani had remained in their hometown, choosing a quieter path as a mechanic, husband, and father. Their lives had diverged dramatically, but the bond forged in their youth had never truly been severed. The funeral was scheduled for the following day, giving Manny barely 24 hours to rearrange his commitments and make the journey home. As he cancelled meetings and rescheduled appointments, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed his oldest friend by allowing fame and success to create such distance between them. The guilt weighed heavily on his chest as he prepared for a journey that would force him to confront the man he used to be. The 3-hour flight from Manila to General Santos City felt like a passage through time itself. Manny gazed down at the archipelago's Emerald Islands, remembering countless conversations with Bayani about escaping to Manila and conquering the world together. His friend had possessed the same fierce determination that had driven Manny to boxing greatness, but had channeled it into different pursuits that seemed less glamorous, but perhaps more meaningful. Upon landing, the familiar humidity and scent of his hometown enveloped Manny like an embrace from the past. He had visited General Santos City many times over the years for political campaigns and charity events, but this return felt fundamentally different. There were no crowds waiting to greet him, no media cameras documenting his arrival, just a man coming home to say goodbye to a piece of his soul. The drive through the city revealed how much and how little had changed since his childhood. New buildings and shopping centers dotted the landscape, symbols of progress and development. But the core neighborhoods where he and Bayani had grown up retained their humble character. Street vendors still hawked their wares on corners, where the two friends once competed for customers, and children played the same games they had invented to distract themselves from empty stomachs. Manny's driver navigated through increasingly familiar streets, each turn triggering another wave of memories. He remembered the exact corner where he and Bayani had made a pact to always support each other's dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. They had been 12 years old, sharing a single piece of bread and dreaming of futures that extended far beyond the boundaries of their impoverished reality. As they approached the funeral home, Manny felt his chest tighten with a complex mixture of grief, regret, and anticipation. He had achieved everything they had dreamed of as children: fame, fortune, respect, but success had come at the cost of the relationship that had once been the most important thing in his world. The irony wasn't lost on him that he would need his friend's death to bring him back to the person he used to be. The modest funeral home buzzed with quiet activity as friends and family prepared for the evening wake. Manny entered through a side entrance, hoping to avoid immediate attention and have a few private moments to process his emotions. The sight of Bayani's simple wooden casket, surrounded by modest flower arrangements and flickering candles, struck him with unexpected force. Approaching the casket slowly, Manny studied his friend's peaceful face, noting how the years had etched lines of hard work and responsibility around his eyes. Bayani looked older than his 43 years, bearing the physical marks of a life spent working with his hands and caring for others. Yet there was a serenity in his expression that spoke of a man who had found contentment in simple pleasures and meaningful relationships. The funeral home gradually filled with mourners, mechanics from Bayani's shop, neighbors he had helped during difficult times, and extended family members who spoke in hushed tones about his generosity and reliability. Manny listened from the back of the room, wearing dark sunglasses and casual clothes to blend in with the crowd, absorbing stories about the man his childhood friend had become. Each anecdote revealed layers of Bayani's character that Manny had never known. A young mother described how Bayani had fixed her motorcycle for free when she couldn't afford repairs, ensuring she could continue working to support her children. An elderly man recounted how Bayani had organized neighborhood cleanup drives and youth basketball leagues, investing his time and energy in community improvement projects that received no recognition or reward. The stories painted a picture of a man who had achieved a different kind of success than Manny. Success measured not in trophies or bank accounts, but in lives touched and communities strengthened. As the evening wore on, Manny felt increasingly small despite his global fame, realizing that his friend had accomplished something perhaps more valuable than any championship belt. He had made himself indispensable to the people who mattered most. Bayani Dela Cruz sat in the front row, flanked by her two teenage sons, Paulo and Miguel. Her composed grief spoke of a woman who had loved deeply and been loved in return, facing tragedy with the strength that comes from having built something meaningful and lasting. Manny observed her from across the room, recognizing in her bearing the same quiet dignity that had characterized Bayani throughout their youth. The boys resembled their father in subtle ways. Paulo had Bayani's thoughtful eyes, while Miguel possessed his father's easy smile even in the midst of sorrow. They comforted mourners who approached to offer condolences, displaying a maturity that suggested their father had raised them with the same values that had guided his own life. Manny felt a pang of regret, knowing that he had missed watching his friend become a father and husband. Father General Santos, the parish priest who had known both boys during their youth, approached the podium to begin the evening's formal remembrances. His weathered face reflected the compassion that had made him a cornerstone of the community for over 3 decades. He spoke of Bayani with the familiarity of someone who had witnessed his growth from a mischievous boy into a pillar of the neighborhood. The priest's words painted Bayani as a man who had never forgotten his humble origins. Despite achieving modest success as a business owner, he had expanded his mechanic shop over the years, employing several local men and providing apprenticeships for young people who needed opportunities. His success had always been shared, profits invested back into the community, expertise offered freely to those who couldn't afford proper repairs. As Father Santos invited others to share memories, Manny felt an overwhelming urge to stand and speak, but something held him back. He wasn't ready to reveal himself to the gathering, uncertain of how his presence might shift the focus from Bayani's life to his own celebrity. This moment belonged to his friend, and Manny wasn't sure he had earned the right to claim a place in it after years of benign neglect. A stir moved through the crowd as more people began arriving for the wake. Word had somehow spread that someone special was among the mourners, and curious glances swept the room as people tried to identify the unexpected guest. Manny realized his disguise was beginning to fail, as sharper eyes began to recognize his distinctive features despite the sunglasses and casual attire. The moment of revelation came when little Carmen Santos, Father Ricardo's 8-year-old niece, tugged on her uncle's cassock and pointed directly at Manny. Her innocent voice cut through the murmured conversations like a bell, announcing to everyone within earshot that the famous boxer was sitting among them. The ripple effect was immediate and profound, transforming the atmosphere from quiet mourning to electric anticipation. Rather than the chaos he had feared, Manny was surprised by the respectful response of the gathered mourners. People acknowledged his presence with nods and whispered comments, but no one approached him inappropriately or demanded attention. The community seemed to instinctively understand that this was neither a publicity appearance nor a photo opportunity, but something far more personal and sacred. Maricel turned in her seat when she heard the commotion, her eyes finding Manny across the crowded room. Their gazes met and held for a long moment, communicating volumes without words. She had heard Bayani speak of his famous friend countless times over the years, always with pride and affection. never with resentment or jealousy, despite the vast differences in their circumstances. The weight of expectation settled on Manny's shoulders as he realized that his presence had fundamentally changed the dynamic of the wake. He could no longer remain a passive observer in the background. His attendance had become part of Bayani's story, whether he wanted it to or not. The question now was whether he would honor that responsibility or allow it to become a distraction from the real purpose of the gathering. Standing slowly, Manny removed his sunglasses and walked toward the front of the room. The crowd parted respectfully, creating a path that felt both ceremonial and deeply personal. Father Santos stepped aside with an encouraging nod, recognizing that this moment had been years in the making and couldn't be postponed any longer. Manny's voice, when he finally spoke, carried none of the polished confidence of his media appearances or political speeches. Instead, it trembled with raw emotion as he began to share memories that had been locked away for decades. He spoke of two boys who had shared everything: food when they had it, hunger when they didn't, dreams that seemed impossible from their vantage point on the streets of General Santos City. He described Bayani as the more creative of their partnership, always finding ingenious ways to earn money or solve problems that stumped everyone else. While Manny had possessed the physical gifts that would eventually make him a champion, Bayani had been blessed with wisdom and emotional intelligence that made him a natural leader among their peer group. He had been the one who talked their way out of trouble, who mediated disputes, who kept their small gang of street children united and focused. The stories Manny shared painted a picture of their friendship that went beyond the usual bonds of childhood companionship. They had been survival partners in the truest sense, depending on each other not just for emotional support, but for the basic necessities of life. When Manny's family couldn't provide food, Bayani shared what little his family had, and vice versa. They had literally kept each other alive during the hardest periods of their youth. As Manny continued speaking, his voice grew stronger and clearer. He talked about the moment when their paths began to diverge, when his boxing talent started attracting attention and opportunities that would eventually take him away from General Santos City. Bayani had been the first to recognize Manny's potential and the most enthusiastic supporter of his decision to pursue boxing seriously, even though it meant their daily partnership would end. With tears streaming down his face, Manny revealed something he had never admitted publicly or privately: that Bayani's belief in him had been the foundation of his entire career. During his darkest moments in the ring, when opponents seemed stronger or when defeats felt crushing, he had drawn strength from his friend's unwavering confidence in his abilities. Bayani had been his first fan, his most loyal supporter, and the voice in his head telling him to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. He confessed to the gathering that success had made him a poor friend. Phone calls had become less frequent. Visits home had become rushed affairs focused on public appearances rather than personal connections. And he had allowed the demands of fame to crowd out the relationships that had originally motivated his pursuit of greatness. The wealth and recognition he had achieved were supposed to benefit not just himself, but the people who had supported him, yet somehow he had lost sight of that fundamental purpose. Manny spoke directly to Maricel and her sons, acknowledging that while he had gained the world's attention, Bayani had built something far more valuable: a family, a business, and a reputation based on integrity and service to others. His friend had achieved the kind of success that couldn't be measured in prize money or championship belts, but in the genuine affection and respect of everyone who knew him. The admission that followed stunned the entire gathering. Manny revealed that he had been planning to visit Bayani after his upcoming exhibition match, hoping to rekindle their friendship and possibly convince his old friend to join him in some of his business ventures. He had carried guilt for years about their growing distance and had finally decided to take action to bridge the gap, only to discover that time had run out. Standing beside the casket, Manny placed his hand on the polished wood and made a promise that resonated through the silent funeral home. He vowed that Bayani's memory would not be forgotten, that his family would be cared for, and that the values he had embodied, loyalty, generosity, and commitment to community, would guide Manny's own actions going forward. It was both an apology for past neglect and a commitment to honor his friend's legacy in tangible ways. In the days following the funeral, Manny quietly established a scholarship fund at the local technical college in Bayani's name, designed to help young people from low-income families pursue careers in automotive technology and small business management. Rather than simply providing money, the program would include mentorship opportunities and practical training that reflected Bayani's hands-on approach to helping others develop useful skills. He also purchased the building that housed Bayani's mechanic shop, ensuring that Maricel would have a stable source of income and that the business her husband had built could continue serving the community. Paulo, who had already shown mechanical aptitude, would have the opportunity to learn the trade from his father's experienced employees, while Miguel, who excelled in mathematics, would receive support for pursuing an engineering degree. More significantly, Manny made a personal commitment to spend at least 1 week per month in General Santos City, not for public appearances or political functions, but to maintain genuine connections with the people and community that had shaped him. He began having regular dinners with Maricel and her sons, sharing stories about their father and learning about their hopes and challenges. The experience of losing Bayani and confronting his own failures as a friend fundamentally changed Manny's perspective on success and legacy. He realized that true achievement wasn't measured by individual accomplishments, but by the positive impact one had on others' lives. His friend had been rich in ways that transcended material wealth, and Manny was determined to honor that example. As he stood in Bayani's workshop 6 months after the funeral, watching Paulo expertly diagnose an engine problem under the guidance of his father's former colleagues, Manny felt a profound sense of peace. His friend's legacy lived on not in monuments or headlines, but in the daily acts of service and love that continued to ripple through the community. The boy who had once shared bread with him on street corners had grown into a man whose influence would continue long after his death, and Manny finally understood what true success really meant.